often organizations are pushing so hard, they want to optimize more versus the vulnerability of facing uncertainty, the fears, the feelings, the stories. They want me to help them go faster. So if you want to speed up, slow down. What do I want to say yes to that I'm not saying yes to? Boundaries is often a word that gets overused. I set them, I hold them. And that's not really how it works. Boundaries are a very vulnerable act. And when we don't have the courage to set them, there's a level of self-betrayal and self-trust that is lost.
Welcome to the Vitalist Podcast, where healing meets wonder. This is your space to gain transformative knowledge, deepen your mind-body connection, and awaken your human spirit. If you're ready to connect with your innate potential, embrace life's challenges, and expand what you believe is possible, this is the place. Get ready to slow down, be moved, and live like a true vitalist.
Well, I'm here with Mack Fogelson, and I am so excited for this conversation because we are going to dive into our relationship with our work. So we spend about a third of our lives at work. And when I was preparing for this conversation, I came across a statistic that seemed mind-boggling, but 6 out of 10 people feel emotionally detached when they're at work. Would you say this is a personal issue, or would you say this is a design issue in terms of the systems that we've created around how we work?
I would definitely say it's both. So we're not crazy that work is hard, and it's getting harder because of the pace and the pressure, but ultimately organizations are designed in a way to create these conditions where we feel disconnected, depleted. But also inside of that, what I witness is we often then give our power away inside of these systems because we think, oh, well, I don't have any power to impact a change, or I can't do it any different, or it's always going to be this way. And not to say that we always have the power to change a system like decision making, or the way that information is shared in an organization, or the way we share power. But we always have a choice about how we move through the conditions that we're in.
So what do you see is a pattern in how people give away their power?
The biggest one that I watch is maybe best framed in the terminology learned helplessness. Ultimately, we end up in this place of putting ourselves in the seat of victim. And it's designed that way. So like the way we're making decisions or assign decision rights to people is often like a top-down kind of a situation in the way the organization is designed. When that's the way organizations are designed, people often wait to be told. They sit on the back foot. They don't want to make mistakes. They don't want to make a mess. They don't want to be retaliated against. And so we ultimately put ourselves in this place of learned helplessness where we wait and we basically are giving our power away.
And do you think that learned helplessness just shows up in the workplace, or is that a pattern that we bring into our work?
Yes. And actually, I would say, I think it's Martha Beck who says how we do anything is how we do everything. And there's often this myth that we are a different person at home than we are at work. So often if at work, we tend to take a back seat or hide or shrink, that is also typically how we show up at home and how we steer our lives.
I think this is so fascinating because I think people just show up to work, they do the grind, and they think that they can just disassociate from that part of their life, especially if they're unhappy in that part of their life. But it can be this catalyst or this tool to integrate this aspect or serve as a mirror to parts that you haven't fully integrated.
I think that is probably the biggest reason that we're disconnected, is because we don't want to do that. Because being connected with ourselves means we have to feel things that we don't really want to feel. We have to face truths that we don't really want to face. And that's at home as much as it is at work.
So when you go into organization, what's your lens? Like, what are you looking through to see how the system is designed? Is there a formula that you use?
I would say that there's a method that I have honed over the last decade that has helped me to understand that no matter what we sell, what we do, where we're located, how many employees we have, it doesn't really matter across the world. We all, as organizations, struggle with the same challenges and the same tensions. And so the method that I have is really an equation of ways of being, which is who we are in relationship with ourselves and also who we are in relationship with our colleagues and the system that we're in, as much as it is the systems and the processes that we use to do our work. And that equals our ways of working in a thriving organization where hopefully we have all the human-centric and vitality commercially that we need to be really successful. So when I go into organizations, that's ultimately the first thing I'm looking at is the imbalance between our ways of being and our ways of doing. Because often organizations over-index on the doing, the processes, the systems. And those things are really important in terms of how we work. But ultimately, we're looking for value to move through the organization, not just money, but time, power, information, energy. And when we're disconnected from ways of being in our systems, in our organization, which is mostly where we end up, then our systems break down. So often organizations are pushing so hard. They want to optimize more, be more efficient, and do all the things operationally that they can do to bring that flow. But that only gets us so far. And usually when I go into organizations and they have problems with like innovation, decision-making, speed, momentum, collaboration, connection, trust, you can name 1,000 things. It's usually because they've over-indexed on optimizing, planning, creating a false sense of safety and security versus the vulnerability of facing uncertainty, the fears, the feelings, the stories that naturally show up in that environment. And how are we learning and practicing to move through that as humans inside of these systems, rather than what happens is we abandon ourselves. And ultimately, that's where we get a lot of the tension and the blocks that come, not only us individually, but in a scaled, we're individuals that we're a fractal of then what scales in this organization behaviorally and also in our systems.
I had a mentor say to me, you don't have broken people. Like if people are leaving or they're not performing their job to the most that they could, or you're not hitting your milestones, you have broken systems. But what I'm hearing you say, it's not necessarily the doing systems, it's the being systems.
Our systems are going to give us behaviors, both that we want and often that we don't want. So it is that diagnostic tool of the being and the doing is like, oh, we could be over-indexing on our systems. We could be over-indexing in terms of our relationships and our people. So for example, let's say that I am struggling with a colleague and I haven't been giving them the honest feedback about gaps and expectations. And I keep doing that. And maybe I'm not 100% honest with them. And it feels like that relational side is not working and I still can't get anywhere. So then in that regard, there could be a system that we're using together to shore up those gaps to support that person to shoulder in expanding and growing so that they can step into, reducing that gap. So it's both. They work together.
And I love how you say we abandon ourselves at work. What is one of the most common practices that you immediately implement in a new organization you're working with so that people don't abandon themselves at work?
So the number one thing that is in every organization that I start with is slowing them down. And this is what is so ironic about my work, is that obviously I often get hired because they want me to help them go faster. And the antidote to that is actually slowing down. So if you want to speed up, slow down. And this has everything to do with us as individuals as much as it does in our organizations and in systems. There's a practice that is constantly moving through my mouth when I'm working with individuals and teams, and then at scale, is to slow down, zoom out, and breathe. So we forget that breath is like the number one access to be connected, and it's something that we can do so quickly, and it's free, and it doesn't take much time, right? So when we create the space and we slow down and zoom out, we can say, oh, what is the problem we're really trying to solve? What's happening to me, and how am I getting mixed up in my emotions and stories as I'm trying to solve this problem? But if I don't process that, then all of that gets in the way, and it takes us longer, and it makes it harder.
Right. When you say slow down, what immediately comes up for me is I'm going to fall behind.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you sit with people in these fears? Like, what's your process for them to be able to metabolize that fear so they are not over controlling and making more do systems like I would do?
Yes. Well, it is, again, it's every approach to that is like that process of the being and doing. So the being is definitely the fear that shows up. But oftentimes, especially in the beginning, I have to start with the doing, because that's where our fear is lowest, right? We feel better when we're doing engineering, safety, and security with the planning, right? And there's a purpose to that, to a limit. So often what I will help leaders do is assess where they're spending their time and energy. So oftentimes we're in meetings, there's no space to get the work done, because we're meeting often to micromanage or control. So if we go upstream and we back that out, we're not really effectively identifying strategy and moving through our work with intention and purpose. All things that can slow us down to speed us up and do more meaningful work, more valuable work. So the first part is just taking them through exercises to question, why am I in these meetings? And of the meetings that they need to be part of, are they purposeful? Are they designed to actually move work or unblock work? Or is it just to micromanage people and get status? We can use technology for that. We don't need a meeting for that. So once we get them to trust that, and it starts in little pieces, once they cross that threshold, it's like, oh, I never want to go back to that frenetic way of working.
What do you say to the person who has a small team? I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs, maybe they're solopreneurs, are listening to this and they feel like they have to do everything. And that in itself is this certain pace that's super fast. What advice would you give to them?
Well, I would say that recognizing and challenging our stories are a big part of that process. I have a 2-day workshop that I typically hold twice a year, open enrollment, especially for smaller companies and leaders who aren't parts of big organizations who have the money to invest in training and practices inside. They come into this training to learn, how do we build resilience so that we're not abandoning ourselves and avoiding processing our fears, feelings, and stories, and start to learn how to do that well. Because especially an entrepreneur who feels like, oh my gosh, I have to do everything and be everything to everyone, that mostly is a matter of them understanding what are those underlying stories that they tell themselves about success, about failure, about what it means to be a CEO or whatever role that they're in the organization, because often those stories are built on nothing. It's built on media, legacy, things that we inherit that we don't question, like I mentioned. So a lot of it is like that slowing down, zooming out of, oh man, I don't want to fail here. And that's why I'm hustling and posturing and pushing and performing so hard. And often then that's connected to deeper stories that we have from our lived experiences, from our families of origin, from our childhood trauma, whatever you want to say about all the things that stack up in us. And then we're running a company and we're detached from those emotions and those feelings. And so we're always on the hustle and we're always on that hamster wheel. So getting off that wheel is difficult, especially as an entrepreneur, because you're holding so much. But your ability to be successful with less has everything to do with facing that story that says, I have to sacrifice myself at all costs to make this work. So I feel like that's where most entrepreneurs stay, is in that space of the story that we always have to be pushing, moving, and the story goes, and especially to leaders in their teams, it's like, well, once we get here, or once we complete this, or once we accomplish this, or once we are able to have this, then we will be fill in the blank, successful, free, thriving, living our dreams, whatever that you want to say. But actually that's a trap, because then the wheel never stops, and we don't rest, and we abandon ourselves, and we don't take care of ourselves. And we very well may be successful in that. But then I'm sure that, there's so many stories of entrepreneurs that get to that extreme success that maybe many of us define as like having financial freedom. And they feel like this isn't the dream that I had.
I feel like our worth gets tied into our work. Where do you think this conditioning comes from?
I know that Brene Brown's work is predominantly based on that statement alone. I would say that that's an ongoing job, understanding and not hustling for our worthiness or our value. I don't know if that ever ends. So there is a practice that I have established over the years, over many years, because in the beginning, when I was learning how to work myself out of my hustle and chasing my worthiness through doing, I very much was like, oh, I'm going to do all the yoga and all the running and all the meditation and all the things on the list that felt like if I'm doing these things, then I'll be healthy and well. And then I was doing those things and I still felt very disconnected and not healthy or well, because I was living from the neck up. I was trying to process my fears and feelings and stories in my head versus allowing whatever those energies are to come down through my body and be metabolized, let's say, through my heart. So over time, I learned a practice of sitting, where essentially I just go in my backyard, rain or shine, snow or sun, and wrap myself in a blanket, and I spend time with myself. I've worked up to sit for over an hour, and that doesn't mean that I just sit there and do nothing. I might listen to music, I might meditate, I might journal, I might watch the birds, I might cry. That actually has been one of the things that has helped me the most, is learning to release all the pile up of my lived experiences every day. So yeah, that's something that has taken a lot of practice, because when I started, I did not want to sit with myself. I did not want to be alone. I did not want to listen or pay attention or have a loving relationship with myself. I had to teach myself how to do that.
You talk a lot about uncertainty and fear showing up, and then inviting our bodies to go to work with us. and using them as a tool to really tune in with how am I relating to everything, to the project I'm working on, to my boss, to my employee, to the vision of the company, to the culture. I mean, there's so many things. So what do you say to those people, though, when they are in these systems where they're not designed with you in mind? They're designed to meet the quarterly goals, let's say. How can these people still show up and not lose themselves in a system that's designed that way?
What I would say is that it all has to do with us designing our lives intentionally and purposefully. So in that learned helplessness mode, we often are like on autopilot with our lives. We're just like feeling as though everything's coming at us and we're a victim to it, versus having radical accountability for our choices and all of the things that we're moving through day to day, whether at home or at work. We get the choice in how that goes. So even if I can't control the system of work, I can still control what am I doing before I show up at work so that I can handle the stress, the challenge, the uncertainty, and not abandon myself or be knocked out of alignment, and then show up in a way that has me feeling a lot of times shame about how I'm behaving, you know? So that has a lot to do with like how much sleep I'm getting, the food I'm putting into my body, how much play I'm making time for. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that, oh, you've got to meditate every day before you go into work, or you have to do yoga, or you have to be so practiced at all these things that many people don't even like. But it's more so, it's like, how are you making the space to connect with yourself and create space so you're not driving from that story that you're constantly in scarcity or restricted. So it takes discipline. It takes a lot of discipline, because especially if we have partners, families, communities, it's not just us. It's all of that, and like all the things that we have to do to support our lives. And then we have work. But ultimately, it's again, slowing down, zooming out. It's like, what's the life I want to design? And then also, how am I preparing myself ahead of these things? It's a lot of looking ahead and saying, man, for the next week, I have wall to wall with this project that we have going on, but I'm going to protect 15 minutes here. I'm going to make sure I shut it down at, this time at night, so that I can breathe, eat well, rest well.
We often see things through a neurological perspective. And so if we are detaching from work, there's almost a boundary dissolving. We don't have boundaries. And then that's when you see work permeating everything. You can't set boundaries in your life. You can't set boundaries at work. And what I'm hearing you say a lot of is setting boundaries, learning how to set boundaries so that, you're not being taken advantage of. Because if you don't have a boundary, then someone can become a little bit invasive. And then that's when the alarm bells go on and your stress response goes up, right? So do you have any other practical tips to help people recognize when they are dissolving their boundaries and when it is time to set a respectful boundary, especially in the workplace?
Yes. Oh, this is such a good topic, because boundaries is often a word that gets overused, and people think that it's either I make them or I don't make them. It's like black and white. I set them, I hold them, and then everything else is going to work. And that's not really how it works. Like boundaries, especially in an organization or even in a family system, it's a constant negotiation. So you do have to be really centered. I really like Gabor Mate's, I'll probably not do this as beautifully as he does, but he talks a lot about what do you need to say no to, which is definitely a big part of the boundary conversation. But he also talks about, what do I want to say yes to that I'm not saying yes to? And oftentimes with boundaries, when we don't have the courage, because boundaries are a very vulnerable act, and when we don't have the courage to set them or have a conversation about them when they've been violated, or those commitments have not been met, then ultimately it becomes self-sabotage, because there's a level of self-betrayal and self-trust that is lost, because over and over and over again, we self-sacrifice for others. And I'm not saying that this is easy, right? It's when you're in a situation at work and you want to really, get something across the line, and your team motivated and you guys are working together, a lot of times our boundaries do get violated. But let's just say that you're giving so much on that project, then as a leader, I'm making sure that my team is getting some time back once we cross that finish line. So that is one example of the give and take. But ultimately, we end up abandoning ourselves through boundaries because we don't think we're worth it. We're too afraid to ask for what we need or advocate for ourselves. So there is quite a lot of courage that needs to be built, even to set and have conversations about boundaries, because you're going to disappoint people. People aren't going to like when you say, hey, I got to hold a hard line on this. And it's okay to be vulnerable in sharing, because I cannot sacrifice myself in that way anymore. This is a promise I'm making to myself.
So how do you design opportunities in organizations to have those conversations?
Well, at the team level, often I'm teaching these teams meeting structures that helps them have psychologically safe space inside their team meetings. Like, let's say you have a weekly tactical with your team. You're creating an emergent agenda where people can come in the room and say, here's all the blocks I have in the work, or here's the things that I really need help with in order for us to achieve our outcomes for this week or this quarter, however you're moving that way. And we're also leaving space for people to say, I'm afraid that this is going to fail, or I think we've already missed the mark, or I've been holding back on saying this thing, but now I'm going to say it, and that takes a lot of time and energy and trust to build those kinds of conditions. But that's the environment. And so that's at the team level. And then obviously that scales across organizations, where then we have the meaningful connection and trust to be able to say the things that need to be said without doing harm and having a harmful impact on others.
How do you see the systems of the human bodies just reflecting into the organizations?
These systems are bodies, period. That's the best metaphor to think about. In these organizations, it's like we inherit that legacy of, top down, hierarchical, power is preserved at the top. And inherently that design creates all the tension and the conditions that we don't want in our organizations. So I'm not saying that this is easy, and it's especially hard for larger organizations who have always worked in this way and think that control is the way to do things. But ultimately, if we think of our organizations and our systems like a body, and let's say you have an injury or you're sick, and so we don't have flow in a certain part of the body, it's the same thing in our organizations. And so it's not necessarily that like top down, like this is kind of like the difference between something that's complicated, which is very linear. We take a step-by-step approach. We go from A to B, and 99% of the time we get the result we want, versus complexity, just like the human body, just like these organizations, so many interdependent parts and pieces. You could try and do this thing and change this thing over here, but that one thing is going to have ripples across the entire system. And we often then don't see the connection before we make that move. Then we make the move, and now the uncertainty is in full spin. So just like in our bodies, same thing as in our organizations, learning to sense and respond rather than control. Because if we think about how much we get afraid, so we move straight to how can I fix this? But it doesn't really work that way in our lives, in our bodies, in our organizations. So it's like learning the discomfort of always being in the complexity. How do we have flow of information so that we know what's happening? How are we making decisions so that power is equally distributed? How do we get that value to move through? There's so many similarities between organizations and our bodies.
And I hear this from entrepreneurs a lot, but they say that growing a business is the greatest spiritual practice you could ever undertake. But I think in this conversation, and I'm very blessed because we are entrepreneurs, so we do get to be on that journey. And we serve a lot of people they work for someone who is the founder. And I feel like they don't claim that status of showing up to work can be my spiritual practice too.
My work has been my greatest teacher. It has shown me where I am not free. If I go to work and I am feeling frustrated, full of angst, full of tension, always stressed, like if I'm in those cycles, it's like, whoa, what's going on? Because just as in our bodies, they're just built for flow, right? So when those are all signals for me, I'm out of alignment. And then I'm not able to give my best self at work because I maybe don't have practices yet, or I'm not investing in myself in that way. But if I did, if my biggest, brightest light is on because I'm taking care of myself to be in alignment before I step into work, imagine what's possible. And imagine at work if we encourage those practices. And I want to be really clear that doesn't mean that it's just like all roses and rainbows, or that it's that we're running therapy sessions at work. That's not what this is about. It's an invitation to rise as humans, to step into truly the brightest version of who we are, and to bring that into work.
I kind of want to get into workaholism. I feel like so many people are conditioned to equate I'm super busy with I'm super valuable. If you're an alcoholic, it's seen as, wow, that is an addiction that's not socially acceptable. Whereas you can be a workaholic and it is socially acceptable. So can we kind of dive into this topic? Because I think so many people hide behind that. And there is this window, we can get them to recognize it. It's this window into understanding parts of themselves that are ready to be healed.
What I have witnessed the most about, I would call that like a stress cycle. And you could name that cycle in any way. We have so many cycles that we're constantly going through that repeat themselves. It's the stress cycle. It's like always so busy cycle, overworking cycle, avoiding cycle, like fear cycle, anxiety cycle. There's so many ways that we get ourselves stuck in that hustle. And what I have witnessed is that it's a decoy. We choose those cycles because we don't want to feel the things that are in there, or we don't want to face something that is happening in our lives, whether at home or at work. So we keep ourselves in those cycles so we can hide. And that's a tough swallow for a lot of people, because it's taking accountability that I'm creating those conditions is a little bit of a smack in the face for a lot of people, because we're in that learned helplessness cycle of like, oh, but this is being done to me. I don't get a choice in this. But it's like, no, we're choosing the busyness. We're choosing the workaholism to hide from something that we're just afraid about the truth of, or that we don't want to face. Like I remember speaking with a leader last week, and she was telling me, she's like, Mac, I know I'm running. I'm always running, always busy, can't sit still, can't, only do one task, have to be multitasking. It's like extreme, busy, filling all the space, all the stuff. She says, Mac, I know I'm doing it. And I want to stop it. How do I stop it? So I asked her, well, what does it feel like in your body when you're in that hustle? And she talked about like arthritis flare-ups and how painful that feels. She talked about her sleep, where in the middle of the night she'll wake up, not just like a normal like turn over and go back to sleep, but like extreme anxiety and fear. So our bodies are our wisest system, and they will tell us before our head will often tell us if we're paying attention. But a lot of times people who are in that cycle, they really don't want to come out of it. But what I would offer is that if those people are my friends, because I really want to spend my time with people who are very conscious, and I'm not saying they can't have times where they fall into those cycles and they're out of alignment, totally fair. But I want friends who can say, man, I keep choosing this and I want to get out of it. And so it's kind of like asking them, well, what is it giving you when you're in it? Like, what is it? How is it benefiting you? And sometimes you could say, well, how's that working for you? And it's a laugh and an easy question. It's an easy conversation about, well, it's not working for me. But sometimes it is, you know, we're obviously getting some benefit from it.
Yeah, I feel like so much of it is if I slow down and if I stop working so hard, I'm going to be unseen, I'm going to be irrelevant, and I'm not going to be worthy.
So if we go back to that relationship that we can slowly build with ourselves, because I feel like 10 years ago was the start of that journey for me. And at the beginning, it was like, I didn't want to touch any of this stuff. I didn't want to take a look at any of it. I couldn't be alone. I couldn't be with myself. I didn't have a relationship with myself. I had zero compassion. So like the way we talk to ourselves matters. I was so judgmental and so critical. And oftentimes that's what I hear from people. It's like, how do I get that to stop? And I feel like a broken record, but every time the answer is go back to yourself. Like, I feel like that's really at the heart of my work is I'm just pointing humans back to themselves and to create that connection and create that trust, because anything we do in here is what we're able to give and receive out there. So if we're struggling to have that connection externally, or even people can be validating us and we just can't hear it or receive it, because it starts with us being able to build that in us.
Can you speak to the resilience cycle that's going to counterbalance the stress cycle?
And so this is built on Brene Brown's Learning to Rise cycle that she talks about in her books, both in there's a little bit in Daring Greatly, there's a lot in Dare to Lead. But ultimately what happened is when I got certified to teach her work, I was in these organizations doing organizational design and development. And so I was just trying to figure out, how do I get these leaders to take these tools and metabolize them and integrate them so that they can embody them, and it really helps them to come back to themselves and also build resilience. And so over thousands of times of watching them, I basically took that cycle apart and put it back together. But ultimately we start in this place of something happens. And so when you're saying, well, how will I know? It's like, well, start by paying attention to your body, to what's happening in your body as much as possible. Just play a noticing game all the time. And so you will notice when your shoulders are up at your ears, or there's a lump in your throat, or like a bad feeling in your stomach, something happened, and immediately your body is going to alert you and tell you that. Could be a meeting didn't go well, a project fell apart, we didn't hit our targets, like decisions were made without us. Like there could be so many things that happen to us at work. So that's the initial piece, is paying attention to when something happens that we usually disregard. No big deal, it didn't matter, oh, I didn't really care. Not dismissing that. Because when that happens, there's like this conglomerate that becomes this cocktail where our emotions and our stories immediately set in. And we will notice that in our bodies. And that may even be happening in a meeting to us, where we're noticing we're escalating and all of a sudden we feel like we're going to fly off the handle, or we want to shrink and hide and we get quiet. So when our emotions and our stories are there, then, and we're paying attention to those, we may not be able to do anything in the moment, but as soon as we can, we're making space to, Brene would use the term, to rumble with ourselves. So this is where all of that relationship with ourselves comes. You may have a really stacked day, but once that event happens, whatever it is, you notice your emotions and stories are building. You make the space as soon as you can to find a quiet, safe space to just breathe and ground and understand what's happening. In our hurt or in whatever experience that we had, the disappointment, maybe it's betrayal, maybe it's frustration, maybe it's shame. There can be thousands of feelings that we have, but that can often become offloading that hurt and projecting it onto other people. So now we're all caught up in them, but really what's going on is inside of us, and all we need to do is get quiet and take a look in a loving and compassionate way. Not judge it, but just understand the emotions and the stories that are there. And if we can allow ourselves that somatic release of just breathing through whatever is happening in our bodies, so we can feel and release. And most of the time people don't want to do that because, again, we don't even have the relationship with ourselves. We're not even paying attention that our bodies are in reaction or that emotions have us hooked. So just really starting small by just starting to notice what's going on in your body when you feel in or out of alignment. And then from there, it's like, okay, the emotions come down ultimately over time, hopefully a shorter amount of time. And then we can get back up from that place of feeling like we got knocked down, or we're totally out of alignment, or we're out of our integrity. We're judging or criticizing or blaming someone when we have a part in that. So when we talk about even giving feedback in organizations, 80% of what I just described is me. I haven't even gotten to the place now where I'm interacting with another person. So if we can take the time to do this, and this cycle can happen in minutes as much as it can happen maybe over days, but it's a practice of when things happen, how do we pay attention to our emotions and our stories, to face those fears and feelings and tensions, to connect with ourselves and understand what's happening, be compassionate about what we were feeling, letting that move through. Then we're able to get back up. And then we're able to have connection with others or be vulnerable and say, hey, that thing you did really hurt me. It scared me because it makes me feel like this is going to fail and I'm not supported. What could we do different to change the trajectory of the way this is going? So that's a long way of packing a lot of things into that. But that is the cycle of resilience, where we have a practice where, you know, there's two paths to this. We keep on that stress, busy, as you described, always busy path, fueled by stress, fueled by disconnection. We're numbing, we're ignoring, we're constantly feeling lonely, depleted, sad in a lot of ways. We're faking it. That path, maintaining that, is just as hard, if you will, as doing what I just described. But that path of busy and hustle is a dead end, where what I'm describing with resilience is we're creating the opportunity to be in relationship and connection with ourselves so we can handle whatever comes our way. This is how we navigate uncertainty. This brings options and possibilities and growth and expansion. It can be scary and sometimes it can be hard, but it has an outcome that will bring things that I desire. Resilience, and the goal there is not for us to be able to take on more, do more, be more. It's not about that. It's actually about becoming more deeply connected with ourselves so that we can more easily access our wisdom. We can have more trust and connection with ourselves, which makes that possible with others. But when those conditions are present, especially in our organizations, we can solve problems faster. We can spend less time spinning in the fear and the drama and the, oh my gosh, we don't know what we're doing stuff, you know? So resilience is so important in so many ways, but not for us to work harder. It's actually to find more flow and momentum by slowing down and building that inside ourselves.
And I would say the outcome is not something external.
No. And even that's the deal of this path. It's like we can even get to the point where we end up being brave in our lives. And yes, that takes a lot of courage and vulnerability and our connection with ourselves. But we're not measuring how things go based on other people's reactions. And I'm not going to give you a different version of me because I'm afraid of your judgment or reaction about me.
How do you see when a leader goes on this journey and does this work, how do you see that shift the mission of the organization?
It's incredible, actually. There's an energy that changes because it goes from feeling very much in that shadow side of like slog, you know, kind of like we always have a burden we're carrying on our back. Everybody's stressed, you know. Then the energy changes to possibility, curiosity. We can do that. We can solve that. Oh, that didn't work. Great. Let's shift gears and let's pivot to this. Let's experiment or iterate in a different way. So it's life-giving. It's not that the work is any less. It just feels better.
What does it mean to you to center around your energy and not your work?
Yeah, I think this connects to our conversation about that hustle that we often get into the habit of, proving, performing, perfecting, really kind of like a posturing that we do. And we think, oh, I have all this stuff that I have to get done. And we center around that task list. Versus if we choose to align our energy, get clear about how we want to feel, get clear about what's the most valuable work that I want to put my energy in, leaving space for taking care of myself. That is like a switch for a lot of people. It took me a year to make that. I remember when I made that switch is I was so task driven and so focused on, got to get this done, got to get this done, got to get this done. And I felt such a heavy weight and like a heaviness in my body all the time because it felt like the mountain, I would never get up that mountain. It just was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so the minute I started to say, oh, if I get really aligned and clear about how I want to feel, what's important to me, and not only in the work, but also in how I'm taking care of myself and with the people around me. If I flip that, I did an experiment. I probably work 40% less than I worked before. And I get more done. And by more, I don't mean more things. I mean more valuable things and things that really move me closer to my dreams. So it was almost like this relationship with trust and faith in it, because everything in my body was saying, no, do more. There's more on the list. It's like I was using that as how I was being pulled. And that goes back to those underlying stories of unworthiness, insecurity, fear. So when I'm steering from that place, the pull is very different. But if I'm steering from the place of, oh, I can trust that I can make space to slow down and zoom out and get clear, now I can go faster because I'm not weighing myself down with all of those trying to fight my way out of the stories, the emotions that pile up really all day, every day, if we're paying attention.
What's the most common armoring that people bring to work?
So armoring is self-protection for people who maybe don't know that language. So usually it's the busy, busy, busy. Oftentimes it's perfectionism. So that can come in a package of, I got it all together. I never miss a beat. I'm always ready for anything. I can handle it. I know the answers. I don't need any help. It can actually also come in the form of not showing up and disappearing when things get really hard. Like I've worked with a lot of leaders that when things get really hard and challenging, can't find them anywhere because they're stuck in that story of they're stuck in the overwhelm and the emotions and the feelings of that in our bodies. But then they get stuck in the stories that they can't do it, they're not good enough, they don't know enough, and they don't know how to ask for help.
Do you see any difference between a male and female leader?
Absolutely. But I would say not in the way that you're thinking in terms of I think the myth is that female leaders are more in tuned and more emotionally connected and that males are not. And I have seen the opposite of that, and I have seen exactly what I've just described. What I would say is that male leaders who are able to embody what we're talking about today, they exponentially create this light in the path for other men in the organization. So it can go both ways, especially with women. Yes, many times women are more easily connected to their emotional bodies, and they are faster at picking up this work that we're describing. But I would say that there are a lot of women who are hiding so much from themselves that they don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole because the hurt is so piled up from so long ago that they're afraid to face it. But I will say that the balance between feminine and masculine energy is absolutely necessary in every single human and every single leader.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your wisdom. Where can people follow you and come even to the workshop that you host 2 times a year?
Yeah, I would love that. So I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on there. Mack Fogelson, I think, is my full name on there. Also my Substack channel, which we could maybe provide a link to in the show notes. That's something that I've been working hard at building because there are many organizations or humans that want to get started with some of this work, but maybe they don't have the budget to do that. So I created my Substack channel as a place for people to be able to DIY a little bit and to be able to learn some of these practices that we talked about today. So if you search for me, Mack Fogelson on Substack, and obviously the link will be in the show notes, but also twice a year, as you mentioned, I do a Ways of Being workshop where I teach a lot of these practices. It's a 2-day experience, and we do it in person in Fort Collins, Colorado. And there's more information on my website. I run these in February and September. So I have one coming up on February 25th and 26th. So I can give you the link to that.
That would be great. Well, thank you so much, Mack. It was an honor and privilege having you here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
If you like this episode, share it with a friend. For more conversations filled with awe and wonder, be sure to subscribe to the Vitalist Podcast. Till next time.